මෙහෙම සේපන්
නංගි මේක ගලව ගන්න.
Good morning, esteemed scholars, distinguished academics, ladies and gentlemen. A very warm welcome to the PhD Colloquium, a cornerstone event of the 22nd International Conference on Business Management, ICBM 2026, organized by the Faculty of Management Studies and Commerce, University of Sri Jayewardenepura. Today, we gather here to provide a scholarly platform for PhD candidates to receive constructive feedback and guidance for their research endeavors.
It is indeed a great pleasure to have with us this morning our distinguished delegates seated at the head table. We are honored by the presence of the session chair of the PhD Colloquium of ICBM 2026, Senior Professor H.D. N.P. Opatha, Dean of the Faculty of Management Studies and Commerce, University of Sri Jayewardenepura, Professor Dushan Jayavikrama, our keynote speaker of ICBM 2026, Professor Subhash Abheyavansa, the co-chairs of ICBM 2026, Dr. Isuru Manawadu and Dr. Sepali Bamunusingha.
So, without further delay, let us commence the proceedings. Today, we have 11 PhD candidates presenting their research work to the distinguished audience, where their untiring efforts will be reviewed and reflected by the respective discussants, which will further enhance the quality of their research work.
While we warmly acknowledge each of you who has joined with us, now we would like to ceremonially begin the event by paying our respect to the university anthem, setting the stage for a day dedicated to scholarly excellence.
Sumagul samidul Velivitiye sorat bandu yatidul Vihikala vidyodaya vidu bimagun Eliyen livimaga sarasaho Sri Lanka Pimbara Randerane Srinivasa Mahaganagare Sri Jayewardenepura Sarasaviye Sri Namaya Randeva Lomudune Ayuktiyedi Vivagashili Asatyayedi Vicharashili Viyat Sabhamaga Samajashili Viyatun Vida
Thank you, ladies and gentlemen. Please take your seats. To officially mark the commencement of today's program, I now invite the co-chair of ICBM 2026, Dr. Isuru Manavadu, to deliver the welcome address.
Good morning, everyone. As co-chairs of 22nd International Conference on Business Management, ICBM 2026, it is our great privilege to warmly welcome you to the PhD Colloquium of ICBM Research Week 2026, organized by the Faculty of Management Studies and Commerce, University of Sri Jayewardenepura. We extend a warm welcome to Professor Dushan Jayavikrama, Dean of the Faculty of Management Studies and Commerce, and to our keynote speaker today, Professor Subhash Abheyawansa of Swinburne University of Technology, Australia. We are also honored by the presence of esteemed academics of University of Sri Jayewardenepura and all distinguished presence. Your presence greatly enriches this scholarly gathering. This colloquium provides an important platform for doctoral researchers to present, refine, and engage critically with their research within a supportive academic environment, thereby further strengthening the faculty's research culture. Demonstrating its strong academic orientation, the faculty commenced the PhD program in management several years ago with the aim of expanding the boundaries of knowledge creation and dissemination. The program promotes interdisciplinary engagement, encourages the development of contextually relevant management knowledge and frameworks, and supports the advancement of high quality research in both public and private sectors. The PhD Colloquium, conducted collaboratively with the PhD program of the faculty and offered through the graduate faculty of the university, has over the years become an integral part of ICBM Research Week. It serves as a meaningful platform for doctoral scholars to receive constructive feedback and to engage in scholarly dialogue with senior academics. We also acknowledge the HDR pitching competition and the Global Inspirus initiative conducted as part of this engagement, which provides valuable opportunities for doctoral researchers to present their ideas with clarity and confidence. We wish to express our sincere appreciation to Senior Professor Lalitha Fernando, PhD Coordinator of the faculty, for her continued commitment to nurturing doctoral scholarships. We also extend our appreciation to Senior Professor Opath for serving as chair of today's PhD Colloquium session. We further acknowledge all academics and organizers who have supported this initiative. We warmly welcome you all and wish you a productive and enriching PhD Colloquium. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Now it's my honor to invite Professor Dushan Jayavikrama, the Dean of the Faculty of Management Studies and Commerce, University of Sri Jayewardenepura, to address the gathering.
Good morning, Senior Professor H.H. D.N.P. Opatha, Chair Professor, Department of Human Resource Management and the Session Chair of the PhD Colloquium, Professor Subhash Abheyawansa, the keynote speaker of the ICBM conference, co-chairs of ICBM 2026, Senior Professor Lalitha Fernando, coordinator of PhD program, Dr. Ravi Bamunsingha and Dr. Travis Pereira, PhD coordinators of Postgraduate Institute of Management, distinguished academics, doctoral candidates. I wish each and every one of you an academically rewarding, intellectually inquisitive morning with this doctoral colloquium. As Dr. Isurumanawadu clearly highlighted in his welcome remarks, the purpose of this session is to give you an opportunity, not to ceremonially celebrate your research journey, but to try your ability, your confidence in deep waters. You may have come across your PhD doctoral studies journey up to now with the challenges and the comfort you experience with your supervisor and your review panels. Today you get to present your work, articulate your ideas to a different audience. This is part of your journey. This is part of you becoming a competent researcher. So we are so happy that our PhD program, Management Faculty, Jayewardenepura University Management Faculty, PhD program, which is offered through the Faculty of Graduate Studies, has been able to create that platform for you to present your research journey. Now in this moment, I would like to acknowledge the contribution and the leadership of the PhD coordinator, Senior Professor Lalitha Fernando, who I think worked tirelessly to run the PhD program smoothly. It has not been an easy task, but she has been taking this challenge, not for the first time, but for the second time also. And at every meeting and decision-making forums, she fights for the best exposure for our PhD candidates, which I think should be appreciated. And also now the the program coordinator and the coordinator, Professor Sri Lalitha, who recently joined the team, will also be joining hand with Professor Lalitha Fernando to help you. And also I must acknowledge the contribution made by previous coordinators, including the recently retired Senior Professor Neville Fernando, and other academic staff members of the faculty. Despite their busy schedules, they still somehow find time to make it more productive and deep discussions for their respective PhD students. And also, although you are doing your research in Sri Lanka attached to the Faculty of Management Studies and Commerce, we have made every possible opportunity for you to get yourself exposed to international academic forums. One is to have forums like this where someone like Professor Subhash Abevansha will be around for a month to give you an opportunity to come and talk to. That is not an easy task. With so much of experience and the knowledge he has gained in the respective field and experience in supervising doctoral students, he would be around to help you. Maybe you can make an appointment. Without Subhash's permission, I'm making this offer, knowing that how humble and supportive and generous he is. Maybe you can make an appointment for half an hour, 1 hour, with the permission of your supervisor, and talk about your research. He will ask a couple of questions. He'll be the sometimes sounding board, sometimes the devil advocate. That will make you think, seriously think about your research journey. It's always good to have challenged by someone when you are doing your research, which you may not like at the beginning, but then after some time you realize that it's that hard journey, intellectual process, the thinking process that you went through is what makes you that successful academic and strong researcher. And also I must truly appreciate our Upatha sir. We don't call him Senior Professor Upatha unless it's a very formal occasion, because he's our HR guru, and also we all fond of him as a very nice and very humble academic who we can always look up to and reach to whenever we need academic guidance. In our understanding, he's truly a scholar who has been serving the faculty not only in teaching but also having established a very solid research scholarly career over the last 30 plus years, I would say, has been truly instrumental and an exemplary person. So you can make use of their resourcefulness not only in forums of this nature but also in your general research career to advance your understanding. It's always good to share their experiences, how they developed their research career with so much difficulties when there was nobody was talking about index journals or Q1, Q2 ranking journals. They had a very personal passion. Now, of course, we get to publish because the system requires you to. We put pressure. We have made a lot of KPIs for PhD candidates. You have to have 2 index journals, Q1 journals or Scopus journals to get your PhD qualified, to be examined. Now the system puts the pressure on you to make you a good researcher. But during their time, I'm sure they did not have any of system-led approach to make you a researcher. They somehow find passion within themselves, that internal realization, inner passion. Even I think story of Professor Lalita would be similar. So now, of course, they are leading the faculty, their faculty research agenda with that internal passion they found within themselves. And that is the kind of personality, the person we would like to see in you as well. It's not a technical aspect of completing a research that will make you a PhD holder or give you the title of DR to be printed at the end of your name in your business card. What we require is for you to reflect deeply and get out of that passion within you. See that different side of you through this experience, through these different types of programs we set in your PhD calendar. So that's our expectation. So take this opportunity as a learning experience, platform where you get to see yourself from a very different perspective, see that other person that you have not been able to see in you before. So with that message, I would like to thank the ICBM committee for collaborating with the faculty PhD program and also Postgraduate Institute of Management to organizing this PhD Colloquium, and we would like to invite all of you to join the business forum and also PMARC tomorrow. You will get to see, some of you would be presenting tomorrow as well at the PMARC, and let's enjoy together our research week of Jayewardenepura Management Faculty and the PIM organized together. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. We now have the pleasure of viewing the ICBM video. It is a reflection of our shared journey as a faculty towards academic and professional excellence.
Welcome to ICBM 2026, the premier research conference organized by the Faculty of Management Studies and Commerce, University of Sri Jayewardenepura, in collaboration with the Postgraduate Institute of Management. ICBM 2026 marks the 22nd consecutive edition celebrating excellence international researchers and practitioners, fostering the collaboration to enhance the body of knowledge and contribute to societal well-being. This year's theme, Inclusive and Responsible Management for a Circular Economy and Digital Future, reflects the growing urgency to rethink how organizations use resources and digital technologies to build sustainable, low-waste, and socially just business models for the years ahead. ICBM 2026 introduces a research week, an expanded program running from February 16th to 20th, featuring an array of activities to enhance both the research and practice. This year, the ICBM Research Week comprises a series of events including the Undergraduate Research Day, the main conference, which is conducted as a discipline-based mini-conferences, the PhD Colloquium, the PIM Annual Research Conference, and the Business Forum. In addition to that, ICBM 2026 has successfully conducted the Higher Degree by Research HDR Pitching Competition and 3 pre-conference workshops designed to strengthen research capacity, scholarly engagement, and networking opportunities. The keynote speech at the main conference of ICBM 2026 is delivered by Professor Subhash Abhimansa, Professor of Accounting and Chair of Sustainability and Innovation Research Group, Swinburne University of Technology, Australia. The Business Forum of ICBM serves as a unique platform for industry leaders and academia to come together and address timely, practical issues aligned with this year's theme, Sri Lanka's surge into the circular economy. The best papers from ICBM will have several publication opportunities, including consideration for a special issue in the Sustainability Accounting, Management and Policy Journal, a Scopus Indexed Q1 journal under the theme Accounting, Reporting, Assurance and Governance for Circular Economy, Rethinking for Sustainable Development. Join us as we continue to push boundaries, inspire change, and shape the future of business and management research.
Thank you. The keynote address of the colloquium is delivered by a distinguished scholar in the field of business management, stands as a true source of inspiration that is setting a thoughtful and forward-looking tone for today's discussion and scholarly exploration. It is now our great honor and privilege to introduce the keynote speaker to the audience of PhD Colloquium of ICBM 2026. Professor Subhash Abhimansa is a professor in accounting and the chair of Sustainability and Innovation Research Group at Swinburne University of Technology, Australia. His pedagogical expertise is recognized by multiple accolades for his innovative teaching techniques applied in both undergraduate and postgraduate teaching. Subhash is an accomplished researcher whose primary interests lie in the areas of business value creation, social and environmental accounting, and the use of non-financial information in judgment and decision-making. He has authored over 50 publications in both academic and practitioner journals, including leading academic journals such as Contemporary Accounting Research, Accounting, Auditing and Accountability Journal, European Accounting Review, and the British Accounting Review. In 2024, Elsevier lists Subhash among the world's top 2% of scientists. He is also a member of the editorial board of several academic journals and is currently serves as the joint editor of the Sustainability Accounting, Management and Policy Journal. Professor Abhimansa plays an active role within the accounting profession through sustained leadership in two of the largest global bodies. Elected to the Chartered Institute of Management Accountants Australasian Regional Board in 2017 and subsequently being appointed to the Association of International Certified Professional Accountants Australasian Regional Panel, he is actively involved in governance of higher education, institutions and professional associations in the profession of accounting. Ladies and gentlemen, please join me in extending a very warm welcome to Professor Subhash Abhayavansa as we look forward to his insightful keynote address.
Thanks for that kind introduction, and good morning to everyone. So let me begin with a small warning and a reassurance as well. My talk this morning is very deliberately aimed at HDR students. I was not expecting to see a lot of senior academics here, so apologies in advance. Some of what I'm about to say will feel painfully, I must say, maybe painfully basic to some of you. But, and this is an important but, experience tells me that many junior researchers don't find these things that I'm going to talk about so obvious. And to be honest, even quite capable researchers sometimes get these basics wrong, as I've seen as an editor of a journal. So the issues that I'm going to talk about, although quite basic, are serious ones. When manuscripts land on our desks, long before reviewers are appointed, we as editors look at some basic ingredients in a research. When they are absent, and they don't line up properly, the paper is often disrejected. So it is not because the disrejection decision, most of the time, is not because the methodology is weak or the analysis is bad or there is a problem with the data, but mainly because the study does not quite make clear the contribution. So today, my talk is not about advanced methodological techniques or clever tricks. It's quite basic, as I mentioned. It's about those core building blocks that determine whether a piece of research counts as a contribution, and particularly counts as a good contribution, a meaningful contribution, especially in the field of, in the broad field of management. Let me start with a deceptively simple question. What is a PhD? So there are some PhD students in this forum. What is a PhD? I suspect that all of you would know the textbook answer to this question. And there's a definition over there, which I borrowed from Times Higher Education. And this is a definition that a lot of higher education institutions adapt with some changes to the text. Although we all understand that a PhD should make an original and significant contribution to knowledge, PhD theses vary significantly in terms of the extent of that contribution. So many PhD theses, though technically sound and methodologically rigorous, leave us either unsurprised or unconvinced of their relevance. Similarly, a research paper is also primarily judged for the extent of the contribution it makes. contribution to knowledge. Now, there are other aspects to a research paper like the implications, etc., but my focus is the contribution. As competition for publishing in quality, high-ranked index journals increases, so too does the extent or the standard against which the contribution of a paper is judged and evaluated. So today I want to map an anatomy of contribution, because understanding its components can help us as researchers, especially early career ones, to avoid the common pitfalls. So the question that I ask and answer in my talk today is, if the contribution is the goal, then what ingredients should your research have? And how should they be lined up properly so that the contribution follows effortlessly? I believe that in order to make a significant contribution, these ingredients should be there in a research paper or even a PhD thesis. We start with a research idea, which is the phenomenon worth studying and that is interesting to you as well. Then we need to problematize it. This means recrafting the research idea as a problem that needs to be solved. Next, we need to assess whether the problem that you are interested in exploring really matters, whether it's an important problem to research as well. This is what we call the motivation of a research. Then we examine whether prior research can genuinely answer that question or solve that puzzle or the problem. And if the answer is yes, then we cannot continue with that research. Simple as that. Then we examine whether these components that I just mentioned are linked together in a coherent way. Because if they are linked together in a coherent way, the next ingredient, which is the contribution, will eventually follow. And it will follow automatically and effortlessly. And finally, when the research has a contribution, then the research findings will generate implications that are meaningful, that are significant, that can be acted upon. Acted upon by practitioners, researchers, and policymakers. That's the end result of a research. So this sequence works backwards as well. So you go to the end of a paper, the conclusion section, and you read the implications. Or in a PhD thesis, you go to the conclusions chapter and you read the implications there. If the implications are meaningful, then obviously the research that would provide some reassurance that the research has been designed properly and those elements which I discussed line up well. So it works backwards as well. So as journal editors, our job is not too hard. We read the abstract and then we go directly to the conclusion and read the conclusion. That provides us with adequate hints and tips to decide whether the paper should proceed to the next stage, assign reviewers, or the paper should be just rejected. All right, so let's go through each one of these. We begin research with a research idea. At its core, a research idea is a simple and initial intuition. Something that makes you curious enough to ask whether it is worth studying. That's where you start research, whether it's a PhD or a paper. And a very common issue, especially among PhD students, is confusing a topic with a research idea. They're two different things. If you say that I want to study sustainability reporting or I want to study leadership, you are not stating a research idea, you're simply stating a research topic. To end up with a meaningful contribution, we should start with a good research idea, not just a topic. So what is a good research idea? First, the idea should relate to a real phenomenon. This might sound very basic, but sometimes PhD students, from experience, they come with research ideas that do not correspond to real phenomena. I'll give you an example. Not too long ago, I was chairing a PhD review panel, and the student was investigating the impediments and determinants of adoption of blockchain technology to eliminate modern slavery in supply chains. So people talk about blockchain technology being capable of doing that, but for the student to explore this, that phenomenon should exist. That means organizations should be using blockchain technology for that particular purpose. But the student learned the lesson the hard way after trying to collect data and having some interviews, realized that he couldn't find companies that are doing that. So we should start with a research idea that is based, underpinned by a real phenomenon. Second, the idea should lead to a genuine puzzle. I will explain this in more detail in my next slides. The third feature of a good research idea is that it should be narrow enough to be thinkable. As PhD supervisors, we encounter this problem quite often. Students are quite ambitious. They come with big questions or too many questions. So our job as supervisors is obviously to bring them back to reality. Say that you're doing a PhD. This is a qualification like any other qualification that you would be studying, and therefore you should be realistic, and it is too broad. And when it's too broad, there is another problem, is that you can't put enough time and effort to investigate that thoroughly enough, deep enough. So that then results in a poor contribution as well. Fourth, a good research idea invites exploration. Rather than immediate answers, it should open things up rather than closing things down. For example, if you say that, I want to examine how transformational leadership improves firm performance by increasing employee motivation and attention, you are already presuming a positive relationship or some positive effects and causal mechanisms. So it's very closed. Yes, you could explore a topic like that, but the extent of contribution that you can make from a topic like that is not big enough, and sometimes not too meaningful either. Fourth, even at this, at an early stage, a good research idea should be internally coherent. So this internal coherence should be there. That is, before theory, methods, data enter the picture, the idea itself should hang together. The elements should feel aligned rather than disjointed. So I'll give you an example. A study that tries to study, let's say, leadership styles, blockchain adoption, climate change reporting, maybe employee engagement. In multinational firms, there are many different things from many different disciplines there together, clearly highlights a lack of a unifying logic. So this is a made-up example, by the way. So finally, a good research idea, the last one in that list, is one that you can own. This is very important for our PhD students, the ownership of it. Sometimes your supervisor will give a topic that he has a lot of expertise in, but at the end of the day, you own your PhD. Right? You own your research, and you have to toil with those ideas and spend years and years working on that idea. And if you are not interested in that topic, then the effort that you would put into that is not that great. Right? And that, again, because I'm taking everything back to the contribution, that affects the contribution that you can make. If you're not motivated enough, then the outcome is suboptimal as well. So the next question that PhD students ask from us as PhD supervisors from us is that from where and how can we find inspiration for a research idea. Here's a list for you. So if that's where you are, or if you're writing a paper, where can you find inspiration? There's a list here. Now, I'm not planning to go through each one of these. They're quite obvious in some cases and self-explanatory to some extent as well. So my point or my intention today is just to point out some problems with some of these sources or some of these approaches. I'm going to use two very commonly adopted approaches to find research ideas. One is reading the literature, the other one is through databases. So practitioners, I mean, there might be some PhD students here who have been working in industry and now pursuing a PhD. Now, practitioners, when you embark on a research studies, a PhD or a master's by research, you usually find inspiration for a research idea from what you have encountered in your day-to-day professional life. So it can be something that you have seen in your workplace or a problem that you have encountered in your professional career. Since these are real-world problems, most of the time they are good, they lend themselves to good research ideas as well. So if you're a practitioner, most of the time you're quite safe. However, our experienced supervisors would know this, a lot of the time these research ideas that practitioners bring to us look like consulting projects. They do not have an academic flavor to it. So then the supervisor steps in and intervenes and works with the student to bring that academic flavor in and to link that practical problem to a research problem that is aligned towards making a contribution to knowledge, not just to the organization that you are working at. On the other hand, academics who pursue PhDs often try to find ideas by reading literature. Unfortunately, most of the time, this approach results in gap spotting, what we call gap spotting, rather than generating research ideas that can lead to meaningful contributions. So I'm not saying that gap spotting approach will not result in research ideas that would lead to meaningful contributions, but when it is undertaken by inexperienced researchers and PhD students, in particular HDR students, then the risk of not being able to provide a meaningful gap is higher. So even some of the research that is published in highly ranked journals are inspired by these gaps, and most of the time they do not have any real relevance to real world. So for example, I mean, this is a commonly discussed thing that for many years highly ranked finance journals, if there are finance academics among us here, you would know that, publish papers identifying increasingly narrow anomalies in stock returns. They get published in high-ranked top journals, North American journals as well. Many of these studies are explicitly motivated by gaps such as a particular anomaly has not been explored in market X, or a particular interaction term has not been examined before, therefore I'm going to examine that particular interaction. So we see this often in manuscripts submitted to journals as well. Authors try to justify the need for a study purely based on the notion that no one has studied this before. We have heard this many, many times. Our researchers, our PhD students say, okay, I'm doing this because no one has done that before. And unfortunately, when I was attending some of the sessions this week, PhD presentations and even undergrad research presentations, this came up quite often. quite frequently. So a statement like this, especially for inexperienced researchers, might sound very compelling, that no one has done it before, fantastic, so I'm going to do it. But the absence alone does not make something interesting. I'm sure your PhD supervisors would have said this to you. Many things have not been studied because there is a reason. Because they are trivial, obvious, or unlikely to change our understanding of the world. For example, one does not need to investigate whether sugar is sweet, because it's not that important to do that. So don't fall into that trap. One of the problems with gap spotting, especially in relation to the contribution, is that it often produces what I would call additive rather than integrated knowledge. It's additive, it's incremental. This approach is often incapable of identifying substantive research problems. That is the issue. Can't identify substantive research problems that have larger contributions. So my talk today is about not just making a contribution, as I said at the start. It's about making a good enough contribution that can change something. So each study adds either one more variable, if you do gap spotting, or add one more context, or one more interaction term. So this also I have heard quite often. Okay, this particular phenomenon have been studied in developed countries, but not in developing countries. Okay, if you come up with that argument, then obviously you need to explain why the findings in a developed country setting cannot be generalized to a developing country setting. If you do not make that case, then there is no point. If the two, maybe one country is developed, the other country is not developed, but if the settings are not that different I emphasize this, in relation to the research question, then you do not need to do that. So the context might be different in many, many ways, but might not be different in relation to that research question. So another common problem with the gap spotting approach is the justification that there is mixed evidence. Again, this I heard several times this week. There is mixed evidence, therefore I'm going to study that again. So the next person that comes along says that you have also added to the mixed evidence. So still we have mixed evidence. So I'm going to study this again. So what's the point? Where do we stop? Mixed evidence is good. Mixed evidence is good because that gives you an opportunity to do a study, investigate why there is mixed evidence, or how can you explain the existence of mixed evidence. So there is an opportunity there. So you have to use that in a different way than the way that you are currently using that mixed evidence to justify your study. And finally, something we see often as editors is that gap spotting research struggles when asked a very simple question. And when papers are presented at international conferences, the audience quite often asks this from especially inexperienced researchers, because that becomes so obvious. That is, so what? Okay. You have this very sophisticated analysis, your data set is fantastic, very thorough, very robust, very rigorous. So what? What do we learn from this? So this is why practitioner-inspired research ideas are often better most of the time. Now, I'm not saying that academics can't find good ideas from research. They can. There is a different way to do that. So research ideas are also often, as I mentioned, obtained from data sets by doing some data crunching. This is a very common approach, sadly, in finance and economics. My colleagues engage in doing this and gets published as well. So large, readily available data sets invite researchers by helping them to ask questions like, what can I find here in this data set, rather than what do I want to understand about the world. So the question starts very narrowly. If your question is narrow, then the contribution eventually is going to be narrow as well. So this approach again has very similar drawbacks to the gap spotting approach, so I'm not going to talk about those similarities here, but let me point out a few others. The research ideas become constrained by variables, proxies, and time periods, because it all depends on the data set that you have, the variables that have been captured already, rather than the phenomenon that you are interested in. So also, similar to gap spotting, this approach moves knowledge forward by inches rather than by miles. So very, very incremental in that way. And another issue is that dataset-driven ideas tend to privilege what is measurable, especially in quantitative terms, right? And some of the most important issues and questions in management research relates to things like judgment, power relations, ethics, sense-making, etc., which cannot be measured quantitatively. So archival, so if you are relying on data sets to identify research questions, you are quite limited in that regard. So the bottom line is that both these approaches most of the time will not enable you to provide significant contributions. Once the research idea is in place, the next critical step, obviously, as I mentioned earlier, is to problematize it, or to find the puzzle that actually drives the study. This step is what we called, some calls this problematization, as I mentioned. Problematization is not about writing research questions or research problems. That's something else. Your research question, research objective and the research question, they are something else. I'm not talking about those things. I'm talking about problematizing the research. So that is basically trying to find out what is wrong, incomplete, or unstable with our current understanding. Right? What is the puzzle that is that is worthy of being unraveled? So there are some useful questions that you can ask to avoid this pitfall. One, what is the puzzle my research is trying to resolve? The most obvious question, what is the puzzle? What is it that does not quite add up? What is it that existing explanations seems to gloss over, simplify, or take for granted? When you ask these questions, you will be able to identify the problem. In industry, you always do research and development to solve a problem. So same way when you do academic research, you should do that to solve a problem. When we start a research project without a problem, then you do not know whether the contribution that the research will result in is going to be useful or not. The problem should exist, right? Another productive route is to look for theoretical tensions. This might be a tension between competing explanations, or between or a gap between theory and what we observe in practice. These tensions are valuable because they reveal where understanding is lacking. Next one is the research motivation. Now, please note that I'm not talking about the motivation of the researcher. Sometimes, when papers are presented, a member of the audience might ask, okay, what is your motivation? What is the motivation in this study? And I've heard some researchers talking about their personal experiences and why they think the topic is important. But that is your personal motivation for conducting that research or exploring that topic, right? Maybe you want to do cancer research because your parent died from cancer. That's your own personal motivation. That is not a research motivation. So I'm talking about the research motivation here. So motivation about is about answering a very simple question, but a demanding question here. Why is it important to know the answer to the problem? So the problem is important that we establish in the problematization, but why is it important to find the answer to that problem? There can be a problem that is not that important. So if the problem is there that is not important, there's no point investigating it. So both these elements should exist, a problematization as well as a motivation. And the motivation also clarifies what is at stake if we continue to rely on existing explanations, and what might be gained if those explanations are improved or revised or challenged. One useful way to think about motivation is to ask questions like, for instance, whose decisions, behaviors, or actions might change as a result of finding the solution to that problem? Would it affect how managers make decisions? Would it help regulators and policymakers to make to intervene and make laws and regulations? And would it change the way researchers look at problems and theorize problems? So, and they link very close to research implications as well. There is a very fine line there. When the problematization and the motivation work together, most of the time the contribution will follow, and it would be a good contribution. So to drive these two ideas home, I would like to use an example. For this, I'm drawing on a study published in the Journal of Accounting Organizations and Society, authored by Charles de Villiers and Chris Van Staden. This is not a new paper. I think it's a 2006 paper. Why I chose this paper as an example is because it's about legitimacy theory, and I'm pretty sure that many of you are familiar with that theory because it's used not only in accounting, finance, etc., but in other management-related disciplines as well. So it might resonate with your understandings. So the problematization. So I've extracted some sentences from the paper here. The authors start the paper with a clear puzzle, the problematization here, right? That is, legitimacy theory is almost always used to explain increase in social environmental disclosure. But in practice, some companies reduce disclosure. Now we know that generally companies provide more and more disclosures, and over time we see that the disclosures have increased. But these researchers identified, by looking at what's happening in practice, that sometimes organizations reduce their disclosures, and sometimes they change the nature of the disclosures from being specific to general, specific to general, or general to specific. This is what they investigated. So that's the problem here. So they have a clear problem. Theory says one thing, in practice we find something else. So this goes back to what I've explained earlier. And the main research question is that, can legitimacy theory explain why companies reduce environmental disclosure? The motivation goes further. The authors explain why it's important by saying that if legitimacy theory cannot explain reduction in disclosure, then we fundamentally misunderstand how organizations manage legitimacy. That is a very important thing. If we were to understand how organizations manage legitimacy, we need to explore this theoretical tension. So that it is important. That is a motivation. So the motivation here is not simply academic. Knowing whether less disclosure can still legitimize organizations affect how we interpret corporate transparency, how we design, especially for regulators, how we design reporting regimes, and how we assess corporate responsibility as well. So especially in developing country context, which is the context in which this particular study has been done, these motivations are quite important. Next, I move on to the next ingredient in that lineup, which is the research gap. And it goes without saying that we do not want to reinvent the wheel in research. The function of a literature review is not to provide that no one has ever thought about that topic or that research question or the research problem before. Its function is to show that despite everything that already exists, something important remains unresolved, underexplained, or insufficiently explored. So there is a subtle difference between how a lot of us understand a research gap and how it should be really understood. I'll explain that. So many PhD students, or even sometimes experienced researchers, get this wrong. So I will spend a bit of time explaining this. They treat a literature review as a search exercise rather than a thinking exercise. A literature review should be a thinking exercise. It should get you to think. The logic becomes clear when you say that, or your students say that I have read a lot and I have not seen this exact combination of variables anywhere, so I found this gap, so I'm going to research this gap. So a good research gap does not say that no one has done this before. It says, given that we already know, or given that what we already know, or we already know this is what we still cannot explain. So that's the puzzle piece. So it helps you to position your research question within the extant literature to which your research question relates. It explains why your research is the next logical step to take. Now I will move on to the contribution, which is the focus of this talk. Contribution is designed at the start, as I mentioned earlier, start of a research. It is obviously the yardstick against which the worth of a PhD is judged, or the publication potential of a paper is judged. What we see too often is that the contribution is treated something that you add on at the end. I even conducted a study analyzing research papers published in journals to see how contributions and implications are crafted by academics. And what I found is that, or our research team, so I must say, what we found is that often contribution and implications are an afterthought. It's not designed into the research. That is a critical flaw. So as I've explained in my talk today, the research idea that is grounded in practice, problematized and motivated, and well situated in a research gap will effortlessly lead to meaningful contributions. If they do not line up, no amount of clever analysis will be able to fix it. So just think about it, right? If you have a weak problematization, if your problematization is weak, what is the result? The result is that your contribution is trivial. And if your motivation is vague, the result is that your contribution will feel unimportant. Then if your research gap is artificial, your contribution will feel forced. So these things should line up for a good contribution. So when journal editors and reviewers say that, in their comments, I don't see the contribution, what they usually mean is that these components aren't present or have not been explained properly, are not working together properly. So you can't just go to your contribution section and write up the contribution and say, okay, I have written about the contribution, it's there, why are you saying that there is no contribution? So the comment relates to something much deeper than what you see on the paper. And there are different types of contributions, so I'll explain some of them. First is the theoretical contribution. This might involve refining existing theory, challenging an assumption, which we have taken for granted for many years, or showing that the explanatory power of a theory breaks down under certain conditions. Then we have empirical contributions. This is about finding evidence that is meaningful and informs, challenges, or reshapes how we understand a phenomenon. Then there's conceptual contribution, where the main advances lie in enabling some ideas to be reframed or framed in different ways, introduce new distinction, clarifying constructs, or offering a different way of seeing an existing issue. So it's conceptual. Sometimes studies make methodological contributions as well. So methodological contribution is not saying that I have added a new variable or I have used a different type of regression analysis method. It is a bit deeper than that. So this is also a mistake that I've seen in PhD studies as well as papers when they talk about the methodological contribution. It's about showing that certain methods illuminate aspects of the problem that other methods have systematically missed. Okay, so that's the main focus of a methodological contribution. I go back to the previous example, and this is how the authors have explained their contribution in that paper. So obviously they have a literature contribution, empirical contribution, methodological contribution, a theoretical contribution. I'm not saying that every paper, every PhD should have all these types of contributions. It could be one or two of them, or it could be all of them, or maybe even more. When you read the paper, and that's why I took this paper as an example, is that these co-elements, co-ingredients I'm talking about are quite explicit. Last one is research implications. The final distinction I want to make is between contribution and implications. Often these two terms are used interchangeably by researchers. So I want to clarify this as well. As explained earlier, the contribution answers the question, what has this study added to knowledge? What has it added to knowledge? What does it bring? And implications asks the question or answers the question, so what can be done with that knowledge? What can be done with that knowledge? So it is making your contribution actionable. This distinction matters because it's quite possible to have a contribution with weak implications. Same way, you can claim strong implications without real contributions. And reviewers and examiners can spot this very, very easily. So don't make this mistake. Don't talk implications up too much. Implications should be grounded in your findings. Findings should very clearly lead to the implications. Avoid motherhood statements when you're talking about research. Implications. So implications for practitioners, policymakers, and regulators. So, and also academics as well, who will be using your research findings to carry out further research. So for practitioners, implications might suggest that how decisions, behaviors, or practices could be changed or reconsidered at least. And for academics, they might indicate how theories could be refined, how the theories can be extended, how they can be tested in different contexts, etc. And for policymakers and regulators, implications point towards how new rules, standards, or interventions can be introduced. So in the research that I published recently in Sustainability Accounting Management and Policy Journal, we looked at the types of implications as well. And what we found is that when researchers, now these are published papers, right? When researchers explain implications, they keep it very, very broad. So if we want our research to be acted upon by practitioners and policymakers especially, then we need to specifically tell them, without using academic jargon, how your findings, how your study can help them, and what can they do with the findings as well. It should be very, very specific when you explain that. We do research for a purpose, and that is the ultimate purpose, for your research to be used. So this is not a trivial thing. It should not be an afterthought. So you should spend, now unlike contribution, you don't need to design the implications part early on, but if you can do that, that's great. But you could still, if you have good contribution, extract really good implications, and the problem normally lies in the effort you put into explaining these implications, it's not that the implications aren't there. So in my study, we found that papers that have very strong implications are lacking in the explanation of those implications. Let me conclude by stepping back to the big picture I've been talking about. So just to summarize everything, what I've tried to show today is that to have a significant and meaningful contribution to knowledge, research should be designed deliberately from the start to include these ingredients. So you need to rethink about these ingredients. A strong research starts with a clear idea, grounded in curiosity rather than convenience. It is sharpened by a problematization and strengthened by motivation. And it is positioned through a meaningful research gap as well. And when these ingredients align, contribution becomes inevitable and quite visible as well. So as a journal editor, I want to reiterate that many papers fail not because they are technically weak, as I mentioned earlier, but because the story that they tell never quite convinces us that it is a research that is worth being published. So, and once that doubt is created, if you create that doubt in the mind of a reviewer, then it's very hard to come back from there. So PhD students in particular, my message is that I want to emphasize that none of this requires genius or brilliance. It's just thinking at the start. What it requires is disciplined thinking. Patience in the design, don't rush it through. And the courage to spend time on the fundamental things. This is the foundation. If you put the foundation properly, if you spend enough time thinking about the foundation and strengthening it, then your research is going to be strong as well. So the house is going to be strong. So thank you very much, and I'm very happy to take questions.
Yes, so ladies and gentlemen, I think it's the right time to ask questions from the keynote speaker. I think yesterday also he gave us an opportunity, but yesterday we didn't have much time, but today we have.
We do have? Yeah.
Yes, we will have some time. And I think especially the PhD, ongoing PhD students, it's your time. You can ask questions from our keynote speaker.
Yes, this talk was designed for PhD students. That's why I apologize to the senior academics at the start. So if you have any questions, even outside of the topic that I've discussed, happy to answer. I mean, that's one reason why I'm here today and throughout the next couple of weeks as well.
Good morning, sir. So one question that need a kind of clarification. So in the current context, we are talking about this artificial intelligence when we are using in the research context. So how it can be utilized in a much more responsible way, especially when it comes to the publications?
Yeah, that's a good question. Now, artificial intelligence is increasingly being used by researchers, and publishers have published guidelines as well how artificial intelligence can be used and is going to be treated when you submit articles to journals. So the guidelines are there. So they don't discourage you from using. I think it's a great thing, especially for researchers from countries where the main language is not English. It helps you to write well in English, right? You don't, and also saves cost. You don't need to send your paper to a copy editor anymore, right? So those benefits are there. So yes, artificial intelligence can be used in editing, but not generally in generating ideas. That's the human thing, so you need to generate your ideas. And now, some journals are even allowing artificial intelligence to be used from a methodological point of view as well. For instance, I have a PhD student that she is using artificial intelligence to conduct her content analysis. Content analysis is a very manual, labor-intensive process. Because of that, normally the sample sizes are very small when the methodology is content analysis. Now, she was able to do a content analysis that a human being would do in that manner using a larger sample because AI was useful. So it is not delegating AI to do the analysis, it is using AI and having the human input as well, which we call augmented AI. So methodologically you are allowed to do that as well, and as a copy editor you can use AI. To polish your writing you can use AI, and also at the start you can use AI as a sounding board as well, right? So you are not discouraged from using it. And I think increasingly journals also, publishers also require you to state how you have used AI and what AI tools you have used as well. Does that answer your question? Yeah.
Good morning, sir. Just one question. I would like to know if artificial intelligence can affect creativity, especially when it comes to the student's perspective, if artificial intelligence has an effect on creativity.
That's an interesting question. Now, what I tell my undergraduate students, not PhD students, is that artificial intelligence makes intelligent people smarter and not so intelligent people dumber. So that goes to the heart of your question, creativity. If you know your stuff, if you know your literature, so you can't rely on artificial intelligence to do a literature review and find the gaps for you. It will find gaps, but it will not find all the gaps, and it will not find the gaps that a human would find in that way as well, right? So this is where the human element comes in. You should be an expert first, and if you are an expert, then AI can do miracles because it can push you further, right? So this is how AI should be used. Now, AI has been fed. I'm not an expert in technology, by the way, or how the large language models work, but from the little I understand, it has been fed a lot of information, and the response that it generates is based on the way language is structured, right? So it is doing that. It can't think, right? It is although it's called artificial intelligence, it does that in a different way. So this is why you have to play a big role there. You can ask for ideas, and the way I use AI is sometimes I ask for ideas, and those ideas trigger new ideas in me, and then I ask more questions. So I use that as another academic, for instance, to test my ideas. It's like a sparring partner, for instance, and that works. So far, that has worked really well for me.
morning, Professor. I have a small idea to get clarification. We are supposed to publish in the peer journals. Now, what is your general idea? Is there any comparison that you can generally articulate based on qualitative and quantitative based researchers? What we made to understand is the quantitative based research are based on some algorithms, the database driven. Outcomes would be hardly challenged if it is followed the real pathways. So is that having a edge over acceptance in the general journals over qualitative?
Good question. So this is the age-old debate, qualitative versus quantitative. Both research methodologies have their advantages and disadvantages. People who conduct positivist quantitative research will swear by it and say that it's superior than qualitative research. Qualitative research, they would say that you make up stuff, right? And then the qualitative research, if you speak to qualitative researchers, they would say that, okay, you could find significance by tweaking things, statistical significance. But qualitative research, you can't tell a different story. The data tells the story. You're just a facilitator. Now, I do research, both qualitative research and quantitative research. So I understand both camps quite well. And papers that get submitted to SUMJ, which I co-edit, are both quantitative and qualitative. In fact, we get more quantitative papers, far more quantitative papers than qualitative papers. So if you really tell me, ask me that question as a journal editor, especially in that journal, there is a lot of competition for quantitative work, and I also highlighted in my talk, a lot of quantitative work, the contribution is not that significant, can be trivial. But when you read a qualitative paper, the contribution is much bigger. And also, qualitative work is it's a lot interesting. I'm not saying that quantitative work is not interesting. This is just based on experience and from the papers. I'm taking the submissions as a whole, right? So there are strengths and weaknesses in either approach. And some journals will only publish quantitative work, and other journals will publish qualitative and quantitative work. So it's horses for courses. So at the end of the day, what is the research phenomenon you are investigating? And what are your research questions? And does the research method that you have adopted enable you to answer the research question in a rigorous way, resulting in valid and reliable inferences, right? So everything goes back to the research idea, problematization, motivation, etc. That is the first thing. After you do that, you think about the methodology, and the methodology should align with that. So having said that, the contribution sometimes in quantitative work is not that great, it's not a generalization. If the quantitative work has also started with the way that I've explained, then the contribution is great as well. Majority of the papers that are published are quantitative papers, and the contributions of those papers are significant as well. It has enhanced our knowledge on various aspects. So that's my answer to you.
So in your presentation, you mentioned about difference between academia and practitioners. What do you think about, is there a difference between when we have defense viva? Evaluation is same manner, or are there any difference?
Unfortunately, I cannot answer that question because I'm not familiar with vivas. In Australia, we do not have vivas. Now, I examine theses for universities in other countries as well. Recently, I examined the thesis from Jordan, and that's the first time I encountered a viva, and I was there. And that was a walk in the park, I could say. So not that tough for the researcher. Maybe it's a contextual thing. In different countries, it's different. So I have no experience with that, unfortunately, to answer that question.
Professor, I have also two questions. So then you were emphasizing the fact that in our research we should relate our research idea with the real world phenomenon or else the social phenomenon. So then in the undergraduate level and also the master's level also we learn the performance gap. I think that's the same thing. So my question is first whether we need to explain the real world phenomenon that we are trying to address, and then later should we explain the gaps or the knowledge gaps or the methodological gaps that we are trying to address through our research, or is there any consequence like the sequence of identifying this gap? First we should explain the social phenomenon and then later we should tell, okay, these are the novelties and the knowledge and the theoretical gaps that we are trying to address.
Yeah, so there is no one way of writing a paper. So I would put your question into the context of writing a paper, right? There is no one way of doing that. But when you look at especially the top journals in a field, you would see a very clear pattern, right? The pattern is that they always start with a practical problem. In the first paragraph, they explain a practical problem. In the first or the second paragraph, the research question and the problem is explained as well. Right? You don't have to go to the end of the introduction section to understand what the researcher is trying to research. So it becomes very clear when you read the first two paragraphs whether you want to read the rest of the paper or you're not interested. And the paper becomes interesting when you problematize it at the start. So problematization, you can link it to a real world problem. Sometimes they start with a news article. Sometimes they start with a gap between theory and practice, like I explained. Actually, you would do that. You're more explicit, I mean, because you have about 100,000 words to play with, right? But in a journal article, the word limit is strict. So you can't make certain things explicit that way by labeling them, but you have to write that in a way that things become explicit. So you don't have to say that, I mean, sometimes even with theory, you don't have to say that I'm using legitimacy theory. You just put your argument forward, and the person reading your paper knows that, okay, this argument flows from legitimacy theory. It's like that. You don't have to tell it, explicate it.
Thank you, Professor.
Yep. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Professor, for that enlightening and thought-provoking address. We are immensely grateful for your time, expertise, and contribution to the success of this event. Dear attendees, as we continue our journey of academic exploration, we are honored to mark a significant milestone of this event, the launch of the proceedings of the PhD Colloquium 2026, which is a remarkable compilation of research and insights emerging from the PhD Colloquium.
I would like to invite Professor Subhash Abhayavansa, the keynote speaker, accompanied by the session chair of the PhD Colloquium, Senior Professor HHD NP Opatha, to join us with the launch of the proceedings. To the front.
Ladies and gentlemen, with the official launch of the proceedings of the PhD Colloquium 2026, The proceedings are now available to download on the ICBM website. We invite you to visit the website and access the proceedings.
I humbly request all the delegates to stay in the front for a bit. As we now have a special gesture of gratitude to extend, it's time to honor our esteemed keynote speaker for his presence and the valuable insights today. I would like to invite the session chair of the PhD Colloquium 2026, Senior Professor HSD NP Opatha, to present the token of appreciation to our esteemed keynote speaker, Professor Subhash Abevansa. Let's recognize and thank him for the significant contribution for our colloquium. Thank you.
Ladies and gentlemen, as we conclude the inaugural session of the PhD Colloquium of ICBM 2026, I now kindly invite the Co-Secretary of ICBM 2026, Ms. Uvini Atma, to deliver the vote of thanks.
Good morning all. As we conclude the inauguration of the PhD Colloquium of ICBM Research Week 2026, it is my duty to now propose the vote of thanks. First and foremost, we extend our sincere gratitude to Professor Dushan Jayavikrama, Dean of the Faculty of Management Studies and Commerce, for his visionary leadership and continuous support in fostering a vibrant and research-oriented academic environment within the faculty. We offer our deepest appreciation to our keynote speaker, Professor Subhash Abevansa of Swinburne University of Technology, Australia, for sharing his valuable insights and for inspiring our doctoral scholars through his scholarly engagement and guidance. We also wish to express our heartfelt thanks to Senior Professor Lalitha Fernando, PhD Coordinator of the faculty, for her unwavering commitment to strengthening doctoral scholarship. Our sincere appreciation is also extended to Senior Professor HHDNP Opatha for his presence today as the session chair of PhD Colloquium session and for his continued guidance and encouragement to doctoral researchers. We gratefully acknowledge the contribution of all distinguished academics, discussants, and panel members whose constructive feedback and scholarly perspectives which would enrich the discussions today. Our appreciation is also extended to the organizers, session coordinators, and student volunteers whose commitment and hard work ensures the smooth conduct of this colloquium. We commend all doctoral participants for their dedication, intellectual curiosity, and willingness to engage in a critical scholarly dialogue. Your research presentations and active participation will truly reflect the strong research culture nurtured within the faculty. With sincere thanks to everyone who contributed to making this PhD Colloquium a meaningful and an enriching academic engagement, we look forward to the continued growth of doctoral scholarship and research excellence within our faculty and beyond. Thank you.
Thank you. With that, we mark the conclusion of the inaugural session of the PhD Colloquium of ICBM 2026. To officially conclude the event, please rise for the national anthem.
Thank you. After an intellectually stimulating session, it's time for a brief intermission. I invite you all to enjoy refreshments and make this time an opportunity for collegial interaction. Kindly note that we will resume our program shortly with the presentations of the papers. Thank you.
The refreshments are arranged in the adjoining room, which is outside this Senate boardroom. Please join with the refreshments. Thank you.